And then he will introduce Larry. So Gary.
Thank you, Theo. If we could just take a moment and, first of all, I'd just like to thank each of the veterans that are here and just kind of reflect on we wouldn't be able to be here without you. We really enjoy this time. And if we just take a moment and kind of think about those that aren't with us, that are overseas, that are serving our country now, just take a moment and kind of think about them. Thank you. It is a pleasure and an honor to introduce the man that I'm about to introduce. This has been a program that I've wanted to put together for several years. The work that he's done is, I think, is just amazing. His name is Mr. Larry Cappetto. He's an independent filmmaker, author, musician, and producer of the highly acclaimed award-winning public television film documentary series, Lest They Be Forgotten. Larry has traveled across the United States, Europe, Canada, and South Pacific, interviewing over 1,000 World War II, Korean, and Vietnam veterans during the past 10 years, resulting in a series of powerful film documentaries. Mr. Cappetto is a national recipient of the prestigious George Washington Honor Medal, given by the Freedoms Foundation in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. This time it is an honor to introduce Mr. Larry Cappetto.
Good afternoon. How's lunch? I was going to talk about veterans today, but I think I'm going to talk about health and nutrition. How does that sound? Not kidding. The lunch was great. Absolutely wonderful. You know, I always am humbled at an opportunity like this because it's the veterans in this room that should be up here. And I know we'll probably disagree with each other, but there's such a mutual respect and admiration, I think, for the work that we do and the service that you provided for our country. I want to first thank Greg Hackman. I met Greg a couple years ago, and I could tell right away he had a heart for his community and for his veterans. And we've had this program for me to come here to Sturgis for about 2 years now. And Greg, I want to look you in the eyes and personally thank you, sir, for your service to our country, for your efforts to honor our veterans, and Hackman Family Funeral Homes for being here and supporting this. Can we give them a thank you, too? Thank you, Greg. And Theo, where are you at? I like that name. Theo, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate that. And it's Laura? Past president? Okay. And I think I see Rosalie. Can I say hi to Rosalie back there? Okay. But, you know, my heart's full when I get up and talk before a group like this, especially on Veterans Day. I mean, today is like Christmas for me. I woke up this morning, it's like Christmas morning for me because I tell the news media all the time when I travel, Veterans Day is not just one day a year. For me, it's every day. And if I get emotional today, just bear with it, okay? You know, I tell these veterans, you know, first time I saw an 85-year-old World War II veteran cry, I had the camera rolling, and I started fumbling with the camera, and I turned it off, and I thought, oh my, you know, now I just let the camera roll. When that emotion comes forth, I let the camera roll. Because it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to cry. I've hugged Marines. I've told Marines, I love you. That's okay. The greatest compliment I ever got from a Marine was when he told me Semper Fi. He told the civilian Semper Fi, and he saluted me. And you talk about a humbling experience. The irony of my work the last 10, almost 11 years now, is I haven't served in the military. I came close during the Gulf War. I won't go into that, but for the last 10 and a half years, I've been serving my country through the lens of that camera. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. My father served during the Korean War in the United States Army. My uncle served in the United States Army with General Patton's 3rd Army in World War II. I'm very proud of that. They both died way before I started this quest to document stories of our war veterans. And of all the places I can be today, I'm glad to be here. Sturgis, Michigan. Wow. It's awesome. Told people I was going to Sturgis, they thought something about motorcycles in South Dakota. You probably hear that all the time, but you know, it's good to see some young people here today because tomorrow we're going to spend time at the middle school and the high school. And I have such a heart for our young people today because they're not getting it in the textbooks. You know what teachers tell me when I travel and I go into schools and I do a program? They tell me, they say, Larry, they all say the same thing. They say, Larry, history is best learned from those who were there. And so tomorrow and Wednesday, we're going to take some of you veterans with us. And consider this an invitation. Anybody in this room that is a veteran will be at the middle school tomorrow between 8:30 and 12:30. Come. Just to be there. Let the students shake your hand and thank you for your service. It would mean the world to them. It's the most powerful part of our programs in the schools. And Wednesday at 1 o'clock we'll be at Sturgis High School. Come. I will ask one or two of you to get up and talk to those kids. They need to hear it from the source, from you all. You know? How can we thank you enough for your service to our country? Today being Veterans Day. Of all days, it's Veterans Day. I just want today to last forever. It's just so meaningful for me to be here today and to look at you. And although not one veteran I've ever interviewed has called themselves a hero, you're all heroes to me. And understand how I say that. I know you will tell me that the real heroes are the guys that never came back. And I understand, I agree with that. But for me, my perspective, my perception of who you are is you're a hero to me. Some of the best stories I've heard over the years have been non-combat stories, because I'm not after the blood and guts of war. I'm after that personal side of how you went, you served, you came back, and you transitioned back into civilian life. And I know that's a hard transition for a lot of you, or it's been. But you know, I'm not after the blood and guts of war. I'm really just, like I said, after that personal side. And that's meaningful to me. So, you know, whether you served in combat or not, it's okay. You took that oath, you served your country, and you did your service. I told Greg this morning, one of the most powerful stories I've heard in my travels was in Las Cruces, New Mexico several years ago. I interviewed a Marine, 85 years old at the time, gung-ho, you know, a good guy. Frank Clark is his name, and he said, Larry, you don't want to hear my story. I said, well, what did you do, Frank, in the military? He said, I was a clerk typist. I said, okay. I said, what did you type? And he said, I typed the telegrams back home to the families of the Marines that were killed on Iwo Jima. And I got it again. I get chills every time I tell that story. And he had the most powerful story. There was such respect and honor. They typed those telegrams back to those families. If you can imagine being one of those grieving families. We're talking almost 70 years ago now. And I had him quote verbatim what he would write. And he basically said something to the effect of, you know, the President of the United States regrets to inform you that your son was killed in action on Iwo Jima. You know? I've heard some amazing stories. I'm not going to go into a lot of stories now, other than to say that I've documented them and they're all on video. But like I said, my heart's full. And it's just, you know, the stories I've heard over the years. You know, we talk about post-traumatic stress disorders. A lot of veterans have suffered that. And I think a traumatic episode in anybody's life could trigger that. People have told me I've got echo PTSD or secondary trauma issues. And you know, sometimes they may be right on with that, because a lot of times I'll hear stories all day. Like today we've already interviewed a Korean veteran. We're going to interview veterans all week here. I go back to my room and I just I look at this, I stare at the ceiling and I go, man, who can I really talk to? Who would really understand what I just heard? And you know, you want to share it, but you know, you call home and it's not firsthand, and it's like, you know, but it's just amazing what our veterans have been through. You know, I saw a movie in 1997. I bet a lot of you saw Saving Private Ryan. And I saw the first 15 or 20 minutes of that movie, and I was shocked at the horror of maybe what combat could have been like. Steven Spielberg did a wonderful job with those handheld cameras depicting the landing on Omaha Beach on D-Day, June 6, 1944. And I'd already been thinking about doing some work with World War II veterans at that time, and I saw that movie a second time, and I remember it was hard to watch that. It seemed like it was really done well, and I've asked veterans that have been in combat if it was like that, and they said, well, that was some of it. I had one World War II veteran say the American public really couldn't stomach what happened on Omaha Beach. And I guess when you go to a movie, you know, like one veteran told me, you know, when you go to a movie, you see the whole picture, but when you get off that landing craft, you see what's in front of you. And the one thing that's missing in a movie, the smell of combat. That's probably good. So I started a quest. I see this movie. I became fascinated with the mindset of being 18 and 19 years old and landing on a beach under enemy fire. What would that be like, man? And I role play with myself. Even to this day, could I have jumped out of that helicopter in Vietnam? Could I have survived the cold at the frozen Chosin Reservoir in Korea? Could I have, gone off those Higgins boats, those LCVPs, with the ramp going down, with the Germans shooting from the bluffs on Omaha Beach, and survived that? And what if I did survive that? Would I have survivor's guilt the rest of my life? So all these things go through my mind, The fate and the destiny that met those young men coming off those landing crafts on D-Day, the first and second and third waves, who were basically obliterated and wiped out. Most of those young men that landed that morning were so seasick, they just said, "Get me off this boat. I'm so sick," because they were out there bouncing in the waves because the weather was bad. D-Day was originally scheduled for June 5th, but General Eisenhower changed it to the 6th. There was a little window of opportunity there. But could you imagine having to suffer through that and then landing? So I become fascinated with this mindset. And so I started my work in 2003 in Phoenix, Arizona. I live in Colorado, by the way. And I come home from church. It's a Sunday morning. It's February 9th, 2003. It's a Sunday morning. I come home from church and I see this red light blinking on my answering machine. And I knew I had a message. So I went over to retrieve that message, and this is what I heard. "My name is Jack Lindenman. I was with the 35th Division Infantry. I was in France, and I went to Omaha Beach." And he started to cry. I thought, what have I tapped into here? Jack was one of 100 veterans that called me from the Phoenix area within a few weeks. I went down there for 2 weeks and started interviewing veterans from one end of the valley to the other. I was on this quest. I said to myself, when I started my work 10 years ago, I said, what's going to be different about my documentaries? The world doesn't just need another documentary. Two things come to mind. Number one, the story has to come from the source. It has to come from the veterans. I want no narration in these documentaries. I want the story to come from you. And that's what I've been doing. Secondly, the day's going to come where I'm going to share this with our younger generation. And I'm there. That's where I'm at today. I go into schools. I have an open door. We're going to do it this week here. We're going to see what happens. For an hour, I shock our younger generation into reality that war is not a video game. As one 13-year-old middle school student told me recently in Colorado, when you kill somebody, it changes you. After hearing one of our programs, he told me this with tears coming down his face. He also said that he was so blessed that he can go home free every day after hearing one of our presentations about the reality of war. So I have this wonderful opportunity to go into our schools. And that's what I really want to do. I'm focusing more on that now these days. I'm still interviewing veterans, but it's so important. Our young people need to learn of the sacrifices that have gone before us so they can better appreciate all veterans and the freedoms that we have in our country. And as I look out among you today, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. But our country as a whole, I think we're forgetting a lot of these things. I aptly titled my documentary series, "Lest They Be Forgotten." It's an afterthought. If we don't remember, we're going to forget. I did a film 2 years ago. I interviewed 22 survivors of the World Trade Center attacks in New York City. These were the people that were working that morning when those planes hit. And I have a tremendous account of that first plane, of that second plane, of the South Tower going down, of the North Tower going down, and who was in there, and who survived, and what happened. You can imagine the scene that was described. I interviewed first responders who were there, policemen, firemen, all kinds of people. I've got these stories. It's in a 2.5 hour film I've got. This is all on my website. And they described a war scene just like the war veterans do, what happened that day. But you know what I'm finding? I'm finding that a lot of people don't want to talk about that anymore. They just kind of want to forget it. I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people do. It's like society as a whole, we tend to forget. We do. And the Holocaust. I interviewed 17 Jewish survivors of the Holocaust. Same thing. In Europe, I guess there's groups, Holocaust denial groups. There's people who want to take it out of the textbooks over there because it's such a horrendous experience. Now, we don't need to live in that, but I think we need to learn from that so we don't repeat it again. And as young people in our schools today, we need to learn some of these things. So, I find myself on this incredible journey, traveling 500,000 miles, 17 films. And I think a lot of times people, you know, that first impression thing, that perception is reality thing, they think I'm Steven Spielberg flying all over the country and doing my thing. And man, it's nothing like that. Traveling is tough. It is not glamorous. Every movie you see about an airplane, you hardly even hear the engines. You know, it's all quiet. And you ever sat over a wing on a prop? But, you know, it's been the most rewarding thing I've ever done with my life. You know, documenting these stories, documenting the history of what you've done. You know, you all were history being made. My job is history being told. You know, it's people like Greg that are helping me with that effort. It's a huge effort. A lot of times I feel so alone in my work. I do. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. Just like you, if I asked you, would you do it again? Yes. Well, you were injured in Vietnam. You lost both your legs. You lost your arm. I'd do it again. That's amazing. That's amazing to me to hear that, you know. And I have so much respect and honor for our veterans today because of the work I'm doing. And when I put my flag up in Colorado, my mind always reflects back to that greatest generation, our World War II veterans. For some reason, I was fascinated with it. I still am fascinated with World War II. I remember watching episodes of Combat with Vic Morrow. Anybody can, that kind of dates me, but does anybody know what I'm talking about? You know, the first movie I ever saw was in 1969 with John Wayne and the Green Berets. So there's this fascination with war and combat and the mindset. You know, the Higgins boats that took these troops into Omaha Beach and then on Iwo Jima. I've done 2 films on Iwo Jima. I actually went to Iwo Jima with the Marines. And the most profound sight there for me was seeing American Marines standing next to Japanese sailors on that island. Oh my gosh, look at that. Take a picture of that. When the pilot banked around the island, it did look like a pork chop. 8.5 square miles. You know how many thousands of Marines were killed on Iwo Jima? And they had the landing strips that we needed for our B-29s to land. That's why we needed Iwo Jima. And they said we saved more lives than were lost by taking that island. The crews that were being shot down. I've been to France 3 times with my work. Walking on Omaha Beach was holy ground. Walking on the black sand of Iwo Jima was holy ground. Because of the history and the stories that I've heard, you know. I've never served in combat, but I really believe I could look you in the eye and tell you what combat's like, what it sounds like, what it looks like, what it feels like, what it tastes like. Through the stories I've heard, you know. The veterans that I interview, they're the eyes and ears to a doorway of the past for me, and I've always been intrigued with time. I played in a band years ago called The Time Machine. I'm intrigued with time and time travel and that whole thing, but you know, going back 40, 50, 60, and now 70 years with the World War II veterans. I interviewed a 107-year-old World War I veteran in Florida once. What a story. But you know what? I spoke at a military ball Friday night in Colorado, and a lady got up and talked, and she said her father was a World War I veteran, and she made an interesting remark. She said there's none of them left. In a few more years, our World War II veterans are going to be gone. That's sad to me. When they die, it seems like a week doesn't go by, I get an email or a phone call from a widow who just lost her loved one. They're dying. I'm fighting my own war. It's like, you know, the ranks are growing thinner. I was at our Veterans Day parade Saturday, and the parade was over. And I said, it can't be over. There's something missing. It can't be. I was serious. You know, there were no World War II veterans. Usually they march down, you know, the old man's club, they got something there. They're marching down. You can tell. If they were there, I didn't see them. And I thought, my heart was broken. It's like, oh my gosh, are we to that point now where there's not that many left? You know, because all the parades of the past, I would see the World War II, the Korean veterans, you know, there's Vietnam veterans and stuff, but time has taken its toll and the ranks are growing thin. So it's important that we record these stories, and that's what I've been doing the last 10.5 years, and I'm so happy about that. I just finished a film called Capturing Courage on Camera, A Journey of Honor. I've never done a film like this. This really is my memoir in video form. I'm working on a book too. Whenever I speak at a rodeo, I always get asked, do you have a book? Well, I'm finishing a book, so hold that thought, get my business card, and I'll let you know when it's out. But this is what I'm doing right now to you. I'm reflecting my journey. I'm proud of this film because in a very reflective way, I'm able to tell my story. about how I've been telling the stories of our veterans for the last 10 and a half, almost 11 years, and traveled so many places. I even went to Canada in 2007. I saw a need up there. I went up there, interviewed World War II veterans who served with Canada. 10% of their population served in World War II, which is a huge part. And they have a tool, they have a film up there now for their younger people. So I'm really proud of my work. Anybody in here ever serve in law enforcement? Currently serving? Okay, I've done a film on law enforcement too. Same way with the veteran stories. I think there's, they all run together. Everybody's serving their community, the fire officials, the first responders, I'm grateful for that. But I was surprised how many of you are veterans when Theo had you stand up. Amazing. I felt real out of place. Almost everybody stood up, And I want to personally thank every one of you. Hopefully I can shake your hand later and give you a hug. But, it's because of you we have the freedoms that we have today. It's because of you. I interviewed an Iraqi war veteran in Cottonwood, Arizona a couple weeks ago. Actually, two Iraqi vets, 2 tours in Iraq, 29 years old, and still trying to get on with his life. We had a wonderful interview. We talked about a lot of things. He was 17 years old on 9/11, and after 9/11 it was kind of similar to what happened on Pearl Harbor during December 7, 1941, where the next day hundreds of thousands of young people lined the streets of America to join the military. Well, he saw what happened on TV, and the next day it's like, I'm going to join the military and go over there and kick their butts. It's like, I'm going to go serve my country. He felt that same call of duty as our young men did in World War II. And he served over in Iraq, 2 tours. I won't go into all of his story, but he comes home and I'm talking with him, and we talked about, one of the last questions, and we're going to watch a short 4-minute video when I'm done talking here shortly, but one of the last 2 questions I'll ask a veteran when I interview them is, what does the American flag mean to you? You've served your country. What does that flag mean to you now? And what does freedom mean to you? You know what begins to happen when I ask those questions to a veteran? It's when they start to cry. I hear in combat, you're not thinking about the flag, you're not thinking about freedom necessarily, you're fighting for survival. You're fighting for the guy in your left and your right. Is that right? You're fighting to come home. But all these years later, I come into the lives of these people. I ask them the question about the flag and freedom. That's when the tears come. When I ask a young people that question, I get a blank stare a lot of times. They don't know. You know why? As you'll hear tomorrow in the schools, because they were born in a free country. They've always had freedom. So it's easy to take it for granted. So I think we need to be taught some of these things, Interviewing POWs, the Holocaust survivors, all these people that have lost their freedoms, and then they've got them back. It's just, we have such a wonderful thing here, and I'm so grateful for that. Talking to this Iraqi veteran, though, I asked him about 9/11, and he made an interesting remark. I shared this with Greg yesterday on the ride from the airport. We're talking about patriotism, and the flag and things like that. And he said something like, after 9/11, we had a lot of what he called armchair patriots waving the flag, And I thought, man, he just really said something profound. I never thought of it like that. And I got to thinking about patriotism yesterday on my flight over here. I went to Phoenix and then Chicago. And I saw this patriotism. We talked about the flag. He said about a week after 9/11, all the flags were gone. Why? As a country as a whole, I'm talking now. It's like, what is it with our country? It's like patriotism's a fad. Don't run out of here and go buy a flag today, necessarily. I got really thinking about patriotism. It's of the heart. It's an individual experience. I can't make you be patriotic. And he said it was sad that 3,000 people had to be tragically killed for the flags to come out. And that really hit home with me. I thought, boy, have we become so complacent? When Pearl Harbor was attacked, what was it? It was a Japanese guy that said that we woke the sleeping giant. Now, it's good that we were awakened, but why do we have to be asleep? So, one of the things that I find common in all even the gentlemen today, all of the older veterans I interview, is they are gravely concerned about the state of our nation and the future of our country. You know? And I'm thinking, you know, can I do something about it? And I thought about John Kennedy saying, don't ask what your country can do for you, man. Ask what you can do for your country. And that kind of personalizes, you know, the whole thing about patriotism. So I thought, wow. And I thought about the flag, you know, and all these things went through my head. I got emotional yesterday. When I was landing in Phoenix, I was listening to a piano version of God Bless America and America the Beautiful. Just perfect timing, you know, one of those songs, and you're looking down from the airplane. And then Lee Greenwood came on with God Bless the USA. And I heard the words of that song like I've never heard them before. And I thought, man, if you can't just sit there and hear those words, especially around Veterans Day, and not have your eyes well up with tears. I was crying by the time, and I turned my head because people would have said, what's wrong with this guy? You know, but I was very emotional. That song has never touched me like it did yesterday. You know, it's time to stand and say, you know, the pride that we have in our country. I guess I'm at a little bit of an advantage here. I've been immersed in these stories for the last 10 years in the lives of these people that have served. But I think there's a message there for all of us, especially our young people today. You know, they need to take that torch and that mantle and to our future generations. At the end of my interview, I asked the older veterans if they would salute into the camera. And at the end of one of my films, you'll see that. They salute. It's one of the most powerful parts of a film. Because it's like they're saying they've done their service, and it's time to pass the mantle. And it's such a powerful part of one of my presentations. But I'm just so proud to be here today. I really am. I could say a lot more. But I hope we all just, you know, within ourselves, you know, what can we do? What can we do for this country, you know? And I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. A lot of you know what I'm sharing, and you feel the same, hopefully, passion and commitment that I do. But I am just totally indebted and grateful for your service, and I want you to know that. So I think that's about it. I do have some DVDs out there. Colleen and Chris, guys, raise your hands. After this event, if you want one, you can purchase one, and you get a free CD of some music I recorded, and you get one of these cool red, white, and blue wristbands. And you know, the veterans that are here, just give them one, okay? And that helps me continue the work that I'm doing in our schools. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But I'm proud of my work. I'm proud to serve my country with my camera. And it's just good to be here today, Greg. And I hope you can come out tomorrow in the schools. We're going to be at the middle school, Sturgis Middle School, in the morning, 8:30 to 12:30, and Sturgis High School on Wednesday from 1 to about 2:15. Yes. And we're interviewing veterans all week at the funeral home. So, but has anybody got a quick question about anything? Sometimes there's questions. If not, don't feel like you have to. Yes?
Did you have the privilege of interviewing Medal of Honor?
Yes, 3 or 4 of them. They're all deceased now, but any Medal of Honor recipients, yes. And again, Silver Star, Bronze Stars. I mean, I think everybody deserves something if you served, and there are things that weren't awarded, but yeah, people sometimes ask me what was the most gripping story I've ever heard. I'm not going to say the worst story I ever heard, but I interviewed a man, I'll end with this, who was on Iwo Jima in World War II, and his twin brother, they were 18 years old, and they landed in the first waves on Iwo Jima, February 19th, 1945. And there was an explosion, and Lloyd Lewis, the man I interviewed, was knocked out by the concussion, and his brother Boyd Lewis was in the explosion. And when Lloyd woke up, he had blood coming out of his nose, his ears, his mouth, and he thought his brains were blown up. And he recovered from the explosion, and he saw a helmet, and he went over and picked up the head of his brother. And he talked about how he picked up the pieces of his brother that day, and he put him in a poncho and took him to the aid station. And he asked the doctors to help him, and the doctors were so busy because of all the casualties. And he tells his story with tears, and he's crying, telling me the story. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what that would have been like to pick up your brother like that. And finally, he gets the attention of a doctor, and they clean him up a little bit, and then they bury him on the island. But I'll never forget that story. That's the first time I ever had to pull over and just like, wow, I was stunned. I was so stunned by that story. But you know, like I said, I'm not after the blood and guts of war, but it's just such a personal journey that I've been on, and the stories that I've heard. And I would love the opportunity to come back sometime. If you are interested in being interviewed by me, I mean, I'm not going to exalt you. We're interested in the history of what you did, the nostalgia of when you served, and then taking these into our schools and teaching our kids about what freedom is, about what we have in our country. Get a hold of Greg, would you? Just do that. We're putting together a list of people. I hope to come back and do some more interviews. So, but I honor you. I salute you. And God bless all of you. We're going to go ahead and show a little video, and then we'll end with that. I'm watching my clock here, Theo. I think we're doing good. 4 minutes. We got 6 minutes. So I'll be available afterwards. Come up. I'd love to shake your hand. And, you know, the table's out there. But who's going to start this? Okay, this is 4 minutes. This is actually, I'm going to set this up real quick. This is one of my law enforcement veterans, but he's so aptly answered the question about the American flag. I want you to see this, so we'll end with this.